Welcome to The Link at Health and Social Care. The Link is a brand new podcast featuring topics, conversations and interviews created by healthcare professionals for health and social care students at Staffs.
Hello and welcome to one of the first podcasts for Staff Health and Social Care. Very excited to start this up with the help from Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire site, recording students where I am based. And I'm also joined with Claire and Joe. So what we want to talk about today is we're about to come out of a pandemic, so to speak. We've successfully made a vaccine in this country. Today, recording, which is the 8th, Tuesday the 8th of December, a 90-year-old woman has just received the UK's first official released vaccine. So everyone's becoming a bit more optimistic. The light is at the end of the tunnel. However, I think there's still a long way to go, and what I'd like to do is reflect upon where we've come from in the last year, where we're headed to, and talk about how this has affected staff and students and practitioners, and explore what's available at Staffs, how we can support people, because I don't think this is the end of it. Just because we've got a vaccine, they talk about it being a marathon, not a sprint. I think that's absolutely right. I love optimism, but I'm a realist myself. I like to think that, yes, it's nice to be optimistic, but I like to be planned. I like to kind of, in my own head, not get too excited and just be in this moment and just understand that this is a process that's going to take some time. I've done a lot of self-reflection. I've been in clinical practice right up until September when I started my job at Staffordshire University. This year's been a time where I've learned a lot about myself and a lot about myself as a person and how I cope with stress, how I cope with lockdown, and how other people cope as well, and the different ways that this comes out on people. Claire, you've recently joined us at Staffs pretty much the same time as me. What have you noticed during this last year?
Hi Ben. Yes, I joined a similar time to you, and joining the university during lockdown has been quite interesting. I've had experience at a previous university as well, in the height of the first lockdown, and there's, as you say, this air of expectation and optimism at the moment that things are going to improve, but nevertheless noticing as well that there's been a lot of damage along the way, and that could be anything from personal effects of the virus, into working with the virus, or working with colleagues, working with patients as practitioners. So yeah, there's been a real impact on the mental health as well as physical health.
And I took myself back to, I listened to a podcast recently because I wanted to take myself back this morning. I wanted to take myself back to the start of it. So I listened to one it was based in America in May, and although that's not the start, that was when, for me, April, May time was when we saw this wave coming from the south, like the hospitals in London, and it was basically travelling up to us, and we were just, I was taking myself back mentally to think about how we were preparing, all those things we're doing, all the adjustments. We changed I work in the operating theatres, and we changed all our theatres recovery units into potential ICU beds. All this equipment was coming in, and it felt, all intents and purposes, like we were preparing for some sort of war or a conflict. You know, this oppressor was travelling towards us, and we had to prepare. And it was like something off a film, you know, and like a major incident or something like that. And it was a strange time, because it was. Early on, it was a mixture of excitement and fear and uncertainty, but in the north, the northwest, we were like waiting for this thing to come, and it was the waiting that was quite difficult. So, it was the change in people that I noticed as well, as well as myself, because I was kind of everyone's wired differently, and we'll come into that later, and how we all differently take on and tackle these stresses. But I remember I was quite activated by it, and I was chaos that was about to ensue, and this preparation was making me quite excited. And I was like, we're well prepared. We're going to manage it fine, and it's a world first, and all these things. Even though that was quite a strange reaction, I wasn't expecting that in myself. One thing I noticed was other people's reactions as well, and I was one of the fit testers. Not in that I'm highly muscular and gorgeous, not that kind of fit, but hopefully you guys will understand what I mean by that. So when we were being tested for the FFP3 masks, which were the masks that the healthcare professionals were to wear when they were coming into contact with patients that had COVID or were suspected COVID, we had to have this hood put over your head and had these chemicals sprayed into it, and I was picked to do all the testing, and it gave me quite an insight, because quite quickly it turned out there wasn't a lot of fit testers. There was 3 of us in theatres, and throughout the whole hospital people were coming to us to get tested, so I'd spend a lot of my time doing about 100 fit tests a day, and seeing lots of different people from different parts of the hospital, because obviously they were trying to get the staff through and tested so they could have these masks. It quickly turned into a session. I was kind of thrown into the role of a counsellor myself, untrained I might add, because they would have this space in this room where they could sit down, and they had to be in there for at least about 8 minutes. Have you done fit testing, Claire, yourself? We've been exposed to it.
I have.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
About 8 minutes roughly, the test, and you have to go away and come back. So the 8 minutes in their busy schedule and this uncertain times and all this chaos that was around during like April, May, they'd come and have this time and be able to take a breath and reflect and talk to me. And as the days and weeks passed on, I realised this was a space for people to come and talk, and it was quite horrendous. I was quite burnt out myself, and I had to kind of figure that out too, because they were going, I'm really scared. What, do you know any information about this? What happens if I do that? What happens if this test fails? And sometimes they did fail, and I would have this sinking feeling in my stomach, because I wasn't sure what to tell them, or it was like, oh, it's okay, you have this hood and things, but we were getting information as it had gone along. So, I was kind of thrust into this role and seeing all these emotions and all these people. It'd be a range of people being claustrophobic and having to put this hood on. So I had to kind of work around that, and ranging from people who just flat out burst into tears because they were exhausted emotionally and physically, and through to people who were just scared and apprehensive about the future and what they were doing. Have you guys experienced any of that, Claire or Joe?
I have experienced, not just myself, but stories from other people of how exhausted they were, because obviously we've got the challenge of change, which has been enforced on us, and also trying to sort of retain some kind of normality. And the analogy that I used at the time was that we were all in the same storm, but actually we were paddling very different boats. So I think it was the different challenges individuals faced, all in different circumstances, but one of the overriding themes was the exhaustion, because they were so tired, adapting to a new way of life, really.
And I think the exhaustion actually manifests in this this anticipation of what may or may not happen. As you said yourself, you described it as excitement. For a lot of people it was fear or anxiousness, and this hypervigilance almost, in terms of what's going to happen, am I going to be able to cope with this, and watching people around you suffer essentially in times where they really shouldn't have. And I think that difficult time has led to a lot of exhaustion, as well as some enlightenment about yourselves in terms of how you cope, or how you thought you might cope might be different to the actual response that you had, so again causing more fear almost.
And it was the adjustments as well, so we'll just touch a bit on the adjustments we've all had to go through. One of the big things was I still remember now when Boris Johnson came on and he announced that we had to stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives, and I remember that, and the furlough as well. And the furlough was a weird thing. I'm just going to go into a bit more of a fun vibe on it because and a funny story to tell you because it's one of I had so many plans. I've got a lot of hobbies, guys. Just so you know, it drives my wife mad. I'm trying to do everything in life, and it doesn't work. I'll tell you that much. And I thought, oh wow, I'm going to write a book. This is the perfect opportunity. I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to finally learn. Spend a lot of time on the skateboard and things like that. I had all these plans. And all my friends getting furloughed, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to redo the house and decorate and things like that." And I got excited too, and then remembered quite abruptly, it didn't apply to me. And all these plans, all these wonderful plans I had to do things, you suddenly realise that you're not part of that furlough. But it felt for me like what we were, because we were still locked down. We were able to go to work and things like that, and but we weren't in that kind of the same clique, and that for me, in my head I was furloughed, but practically I wasn't. It's really strange. I don't know if it makes sense, but it was a real bizarre time, especially being surrounded by my friends who weren't in the professional key workers at the time, and what they had, what they were doing and stuff like that, and I was kind of happy they were safe and things like that, but I was kind of a bit, I don't know. I put all these expectations on it. That's what it is. I put a lot of expectations on myself of things I was going to achieve. Right, I've got this much time. I'm going to get fit. I'm going to go for runs regularly now. I'm going to maybe look at changing my diet. I overloaded myself with all these personal expectations, and this was quite a common theme. A lot of people were putting a lot of expectations on themselves during this time of things they were going to do and how they were going to adapt and things like that. And when these aren't met, that caused me a lot of frustration, and I got quite down about it as well, because I felt all I was doing was going to work and coming home and preparing for the next day, and that was it. And what I didn't take into account was that although, yes, I was excited about it, and I was kind of like waiting for this storm to hit us, and but I was exhausted, and I couldn't figure out why, because physically I wasn't doing a lot. But I was really, really tired, and I couldn't do all these plan to do all these things that I had put on myself, and that made me fed up with myself and exhausted, and I didn't have that emotional energy to give. And especially with doing these fit tests as well, that was a real phenomena for me to go through, because I was like, oh well, I'm allowing people to talk and allowing them to get it off the chest, and I felt quite good about that. But I wasn't aware the amount of energy that was taken from me. How is that explained?
I think, Ben, in a sense, as you've described it, when people are coming to you and almost having that chance to offload, what we're talking about there is vicarious trauma. There are obviously varying degrees of that, and depending on exposure and severity of disclosure, I think the effects on different people will show in different ways. But yeah, absolutely, it's transference. It's about them being able to almost let off some steam, if you will, but actually that steam goes somewhere. It lands on you, and it's about you being taken unawares by that, and not being able to plan or prepare for that, and look at your own self-care whilst you were in that role, because it was unexpected. You didn't see that was coming.
Yeah, I'd agree with Claire. It's about absorbing other people's stresses and anxieties, and where do you put that when you're holding on to it? And so thinking about your own self-care and how much you're able to hold on to for other people.
Yeah, really good point there, and I think that segues nicely into recognition is one of the things we've got down next. We've talked about what happened, and a lot of it, the recognition part was out the window, because we had to just cope. This thing was coming whether we liked it or not. We had to adapt, we had to cope, we had to be at home, we had to socially distance and things like that. But somebody called it physically distancing. I like that, because I think it is a poor term, social distancing, because the whole point is that we try and stay connected, whether it's been over Zoom or Teams or all these other things. We've really been passionate about connecting with each other, but it's physical distancing as well. there wasn't a lot of time to recognise what was going on. I think that's what I was seeing in the staff and my friends as well. The behaviours change and the exhaustion, things like that. How do we start to recognise in ourselves that things that we're not coping well with the situations that have happened, and how we're going to recognise it in the future? Because we're about to go into this other transition that I've got anxieties about, and this is another reason I wanted to talk to you about this and share this with staff and students. I've got anxieties about the transition back into, in quotes, the new norm. So how do we recognise when things aren't going well in ourselves and we're not optimised?
I think, first of all, Ben, I think you made a good point in that sometimes it is about awareness. How well do we know ourselves? Have we met stress before? How have we recognised it? Have we reflected on it? So personal reflection's obviously key, but it might be that other people have noticed it in us rather than ourselves, and that can manifest in different ways. So it could be physical, physiological. It could be the fatigue, muscle tension, gastrointestinal disturbance. Can't talk. Sorry. It could be, and commonly is, in cognitions, in our thoughts, the way that we start to replay events maybe, or doubt ourselves or our capabilities or confidence. It could be irrational thoughts connected to fear. It could be the what-ifs and the extremes and the catastrophising. It might be we change our behaviours. It might be that we have different sleep patterns, eating patterns. It could be that we can't settle or we can't do our normal daily activities. We might withdraw, or we might go the other way and want to be in touch with as many people as possible. It could be imagery, it could be visualizations, it could be pure emotion, just anxiety, upset, loneliness, starting to notice these things creep in that wouldn't normally have a place, that takes over our daily activities.
Joe?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously we've been through an experience that we've not been through before, and our bodies are unconsciously remembering what we've experienced. And it's about being more self-aware and starting to listen to our bodies and what it's saying to us. So if you're feeling a bit low, or you're having different aches and pains, the tension in your shoulders, and it's being very aware of how you're feeling. And when you're more self-aware, that can then give an indicator of perhaps what we can do to help ourselves and to look after ourselves whilst we're retransitioning back into this new normal.
Yeah, and that's fantastic, because that's really connects with me, and that self-realisation is really important. And I'll tell you a little story and share something about myself personally. I've been diagnosed with ADHD and ASD, and I've had that for about 12 years, roughly, I think. My maths is right. And for a long time I hid that and was fairly ashamed of it, and especially in the job that we're in. Ironically, the good qualities for such a job, and quite a lot of undiagnosed people remain in these high-risk jobs, police, paramedic, the army, things like that. And I thought, the classic thing in this country is you get a diagnosis, and they say, if there is a pharmacological route available, they're offered, and it's all great. And yes, and it's like putting glasses on if meds work for you, and it's all good. But when I decided to come open about the diagnosis and be brave and bold, which I followed Daniel Johnson, who's an SNP, and he stood up in Parliament and disclosed his own ADHD and his drive for supporting his local constituents in accessing mental health. It was only at that point last year, when I accepted it and understood it, that I then ventured into strategies and being self-aware. I think this is, for me, one of the single most important parts of resilience, and in that I was able to connect with other people and find strategies and understand. So, for example, one thing might be, okay, I lose things a lot, but connecting with other people and getting strategies like I have a launch box, so it's this box that I keep at the entrance and exit of the house, and everything I commonly lose goes into that box. So in the morning I find it and it's easy. But I didn't know that, and I think when we can beat ourselves up sometimes. For example, just to digress, I had somebody talk to me about they were normally really academic, really on it, really on the ball, and they were like, why can't I do this? I'm going to have to ask for an extension, it's just awful. And we beat ourselves up because we don't hit our own expectations of self. But then there's that self-compassion that, okay, but that's what you knew at the time, and that's when we know differently and we have differently, then we can do and be different. And I think that was a big deal for me. So that's why I think this whole thing's really connected with me, because I think you were segueing nicely into looking at strategies and resilience, because part of it is that education. And I think that's something that, having had a conversation with Claire in the past, and to some extent Joe as well, is missing from healthcare education. I think personally, if I was, say for example, hypothetically, I went and I was diagnosed, in my opinion, the best way would be I go off to a class at the weekend. I go to a lecture or an online seminar and I get taught about it. And then I get offered strategies and CBT and lots of other different things that work. But in healthcare, I think that one thing that all professions share, and the police as well outside of healthcare, and fire and all those other professions, is that we share that there's a high chance we'll get exposed to distressing situations and crisis events, but we're not taught within the structure how to manage that. Within the educational structure, there's nothing in the curriculum that tells us, okay, here's what's you could get exposed to. How are you going to cope with that? How are you going to understand that? How are you going to debrief yourself? How are you going to cope? Who can you talk to? And that I think this has really opened a door for me to kind of link in and go, okay, well, I think that's something that's missing. Do you agree?
Absolutely, and it isn't just from a university point of view. It starts right from, I would say, primary school and through to high school and
right.
college. And so if we can start off earlier with younger people so that they learn coping strategies or understand why they're feeling how they're feeling, or they're behaving in certain ways, I think it's missing out of education altogether. Yeah.
I completely agree with Joe, and I think there's different ways that we can do that. As you rightly said, Ben, I think the starting point is this self-awareness and understanding ourselves, being able to reflect. But then we can move into more practical solutions, not just on a daily basis as you do, with your trades, etc. But we can move with solutions with your thoughts as well. We can start to work at how we operate, how we think, why we think that way, and when we know that we're almost planning for that exposure of stress and trauma, for ourselves, then we can almost develop this well-being toolkit, if you will, that has things within that, tools and strategies that we can use going forward, that really is individual to ourselves. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. I think we all have that toolkit that can be opened. We just put in our individual things in there that we turn to at times when we do need that bit of support. And that can be lots of different things. Anything from phone numbers for people who we want to ring when we're feeling in a certain way, and that might be different people depending on mood. Could be places we like to visit, songs we like to listen to, films we like to view. And hobbies, as you say, are really important. I was just saying, some of the soothing things can start to bring in some of the slowing down, bringing in the soothing system, so that we can get the neurochemical response that we want to slow everything down in our body, try and reduce some anxiety, reduce our heart rate, blood pressure, these sorts of things. And I think we can have this multitude of strategies within our own virtual toolbox, if you will. It's individual.
Yeah, and I think that's right. It is individual, isn't it? And that's one thing that in my community they talk about. If you've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD, and that everyone's strategies are different. And but it's having that shed to walk into and that toolbox to open up and to find out the right tool for the right job for you. And that's absolutely right. There's this. You touched on soothing, and I think that's really important, and that's part of the self-care. But there's this. There's soothing and is it coddling? So you know that if soothing is good because it feels good and it has a good impact on you, whereas coddling is negative. So coddling, what that might look like for me is moving away from talking to people, isolating myself, getting absorbed in something that isn't important or has a good outcome, or maybe having a drink, or I know for some people that might be starting up smoking. Is that a thing, this difference between soothing and coddling?
It is, and I think what we're aiming for is a balance here. So a classic example is a compassion-focused therapy model from Paul Gilbert, actually, who tries to balance out our drive system, our soothing system, and our threat system. So we have that happy balance of neurochemicals that are producing these physiological responses within us. So when you're looking at strategies, you're able to look at it objectively and see whether we're looking at risky strategies, healthy strategies, and ones that can be sustained and maximise the positive impact on us.
For some, it might be alcoholism, it might be withdrawing, and at the times they're quick fixes, or eating, and they are quick fixes. For me, that we call it dopamine hunting. And,
absolutely, and that fits in with the drive system that is in the model. And when we're seeking dopamine all the while, what happens is we go into overdrive with work mode, and we can be driven too much. We can be reward based, so always seeking those achievements, and that very much offsets that balance between the drive, the soothing, and the threat, which would suggest a happy medium. But I think also you mentioned earlier about expectations of yourself and not meeting that, and we need to identify whether they are expectations that you hold yourself, or whether they are ones that society or culture may put upon you, so your self-concept.
Yeah, I like that. There's one thing, you may have heard of it, you may not, Joe and Claire actually. One thing that really helped me was the story I'm telling myself is. Have you heard of that?
No, I'm sorry. No,
that's okay, that's fine. Oh, damn. I'm going to bomb it. Pull up. No, I'll try it, and hopefully it works. It's good for me. I have a thing of, oh man, that person really expects this of me, or they expect this work to be perfect, or I'm here now and working at a university, there's all these expectations on me, and quite often they're the projected expectations that I'm putting on myself. And Brené Brown refers to this as the story I'm telling myself is, and this is from her book The Gift of Imperfection, which is a really interesting read. And it's this idea of that you tell yourself this story, and it's important to recognise and make sure that you understand that is the story you're telling yourself, and have you got any evidence for that. And I think this can be true for manifestations where you were talking before about thinking about the worst case scenario, and we take ourselves to the worst case scenario and project that. And I did that. I figured I did that quite a lot. I was telling myself a lot of stories. Some of that came from my inability to read body language properly and take notes and cues from social situations, and I'd make my own assumptions based on past experiences and things like that. And now I've started this dialogue of inner dialogue of saying, no, that's the story I'm telling myself. And the antidote to the story I'm telling myself was a technique where it was mindfulness with projection. So I take a minute, and for me, mindfulness is moving mindfulness. I find it very hard to sit still and to be in that calm moment. So I might do something like a repetitive pattern. I drum, so it might look like drumming, it might look like stretching or movement or yoga. And within that, I use a technique called the best possible self, or the BPS, where I think about the situation I'm anxious about, and I imagine, it's easy for me, I've got a very big imagination, so I can create all kinds of worlds. But I imagine this, that what's going to happen is going to work really well. For example, if it looks like a job interview, or starting a new job, or meeting a new person, or doing this today, it might look like that I have spent time in a moment which is a good moment for me, and that differs for everyone else, and thinking about how positive that's going to be, thinking about imagining myself doing well at that, and that helps prevent the story I'm telling myself is. And do you recognise any of those as good techniques, or have you used that yourself?
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the STOP technique.
Okay.
And it's an acronym, and when you're feeling anxious, or you're having those negative thoughts, or perhaps engaging in unhelpful behaviours, it's about stopping and taking a breath, observing what's going on internally and how you're feeling, and also observe what's going on externally and the expectations put on yourself. And then engaging with a perception change, seeing things differently and challenging those negative thoughts. And by practicing the perception change, is a bit more positive and constructive, and continue to practice that, so that becomes the norm for you, and perceiving things differently.
Absolutely. It really rings true with that. And also with your visualisation, you've been able to use your imagination quite a lot. This mindfulness does fit in lots of different ways, so it could be anything from a mindful nature walk, it could be meditation, with the drumming as well, it could be journeying, things like that. So it doesn't have to be a standstill process, it can be what you want it to be, it just has to work for you. And there's a multitude of things out there, apps and so forth, that help you with that and guide you through a process that you can start to pick up and run with yourself.
Yeah, that's really good. And I like the idea that I was really grateful to hear that meditation could take on physical forms. I remember I was sat with a friend who was a psychotherapist, and she offered to do some work with me, and I was like, yeah, sure, that's great. So we sat on the couch, and at the end of it, she was already looking perplexed and quite exhausted from the rate of words per second coming out of my mouth. And then she said, "Oh, okay, we'll do some mindfulness and some meditation. So I want you to close your eyes and imagine you're on a beach." And I was shuffling around in my chair, and no, come on, imagine the waves are lapping up, and that wasn't working. And she said, "What's the problem?" I said, "Well, what kind of beach is it? Where are we? What's the sand feel like? I've got this ocean," but then I imagined there was like a shark coming out of it, and then everyone's screaming and running away, and she was just like this face of horror on her. She goes, "Let's try a different thing, Ben. Let's try imagining there's a ball, okay? And your thoughts can go into, let the thoughts come in, and they're going to get surrounded in this ball, or a balloon." And I'd gone on a tangent. I'd gone already. My balloon was, what colour was it? I was thinking about how reflective it was. What's it reflecting? And she saw me moving around in my chair again and getting frustrated, and she was like, "What's happening with the balloon, Ben?" I'm thinking about how big it is. Did you put your thoughts in it, Ben? No, they're there. I haven't got to the point where I can put my thoughts in it yet, because I haven't properly visualised what this balloon looks like. She's given me a great idea for a design on something else, and she's like, "Right, okay, I don't think this is going to work." And I think that's that helped me get past a barrier for my own, because meditation is really important. It is absolutely slammed in evidence that it has positive outcomes for our well-being, and to the point where I'm getting there. But it was a barrier because meditation is synonymous with these people who have the patience for meditation. But meditation, as you quite rightly said, Claire and Joe, it doesn't have to take on that form of lying still and being peaceful and being in some sort of impossible yoga pose whilst you're doing it. You know, it can take on many forms, and for me the two big things were drumming was one of them. But also on my motorbike, when I'm travelling, I've got to concentrate that much on obviously not dying. It is a good thing, but it puts me in a state of zen that I can I have free flow thoughts, and I can digest and reflect, and it's really, really calming. And what does it look like for you?
I think what you've just described there is a classic journey, a physical journey as well as a mental one.
Right.
You literally are going from A to B, and I do practice meditation, although what I will say is it really is a skill. It isn't something that you can attack on the first go and get perfect in your head. I mean, we talked about expectation before, and we all have maybe these preconceived ideas of what it should feel like or what we should get from it, and it doesn't happen immediately. This is about working towards something that's right for you. As I say, it's an individual thing, but journeying as well. There's all sorts of different journeys you can take, physical or mental, one being shamanic journeying as well, and that visualization, the imagination, allowing yourself, as you described when you're on the beach or looking at the ball, there isn't a right or a wrong. The ball doesn't look a certain way, and you don't have to see that. What actually happens is you visualize what you visualize, and that is the right thing. It's allowing yourself to have permission to create this world of your own and to feel comfortable within it because you've created it. So, meditation, journey and visualizations, it can be lots of different things, but it always involves senses. Mindfulness itself, with your we talk sometimes about tree hugging and that sort of thing, but at the end of the day, a simple walk through the woods, what can you smell, what can you hear under your feet, what can you touch, what does the bark feel like, how long's that tree been there, what's that seen, and almost just trying to bring things to life for you that gives you that focus away from that anxiety, that fear, that chaos, the chaotic life that you may find yourself in at times, and it's just slowing things down for you, but you can still be on the move within that.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm there already. You sent me there. What does it look like for you, Joe? What's your, if you don't mind sharing, of course. What do you do to let your head rest?
I think they are just very simple, basic grounding techniques, and bringing myself into the here and now. Very often we get caught on this treadmill of running at 100 miles an hour, and being able to hit that stop button and get off, and like Claire says, slow everything down. And a favourite grounding technique of mine is to just be in the moment and using all the senses of things that you can see, you can hear, you can smell, you can taste and you can touch. And it isn't just about bringing yourself into the here and now, it's an appreciation of what is around us and what we can hear and see, and it takes you away of worrying about what has happened or perhaps worrying about what may happen. So grounding techniques for me are a go-to.
Excellent, I like that. Yeah, really nice. Which kind of, I want to explore self-care because there's been so many buzzwords around, and when you actually look into these things, people use the buzzwords, and the annoyance is that they don't really fully explain what that looks like or what that means or put it into any tangible form. And this used to really bother me. It's like, oh yeah, guys, we're going to do some self-care, okay? It's like, what are they on about? What are the cooking? Right, okay, well, hang on a minute. Is that it? Is that all the elements of self-care? Now, I have my own, and but for people that are listening, and this buzzword's been knocking around about self-care, and it's getting worn out without fully getting understood, in my opinion. What is self-care?
For me?
What are the elements? Well, for generally, what are elements of self-care?
Right, well, I think self-care is a buzzword, and it isn't just about taking a bath or going for a walk. It's so much more than that. Yes, it's about giving yourself permission to say, do you know what, it's okay to take some time out. It's okay that I'm allowed to do this. And it's that inner self-dialogue, I think, about self-forgiveness when we feel as though we're not achieving what we should achieve. It's about being kind to ourselves and saying, you know what, it's okay to feel a bit exhausted at the moment, and I'm recognising that it's okay that I need to take time out. It's okay that I'm not doing what everybody expects me to do at this moment in time. I suppose it's like putting that great big stick down that you hit yourself with, and saying, you know what, it's okay. I'm a human being. And I think it's the acceptance of being a human being. We're not machines, we're not computers, and we are allowed to feel low and exhausted, but we're also then allowed, and we can give ourselves permission to do something about it that helps us, and not to feel that guilt that we are doing something for us, because we can't pour from an empty jug.
That reminds me of one of my friends recently come into contact with Annie, you know who you are. She said that one cannot drink from an empty cup, and that's so true as well. And that goes back and ties in nicely with that person I was talking to, who felt they couldn't understand why they weren't functional as they were. And this is what me and Joe have talked about in the past. One's a window, mine's a door, but they're the constructs of, mine's not a door, sorry, mine's a wall of awful. And you used an analogy of a window. And the idea is that this wall of awful is the bad bits in your life. And when things happen, it could be during a day or during a week, it stacks more bricks up on this wall of awful. And your tolerance level for coping and your kind of buffer is affected once this wall gets too high. You're likely to tip over it, and that's the thing, and you're not going to function normally. So the things that for me is you either Hulk smash through it, and for neurotypicals and other people as well, it's not just myself. That looks like losing your temper, blowing off at people when. That's out of character for you. Throwing things around, breaking things, temper tantrums, and you smash through it. Yeah, you've done it, well done, but there's a lot of collateral damage, and I'm all too aware of that. And the other thing is we can freeze and try and just pretend it's not there, and that's that looking at the wall of awful but not doing anything about it. And then there's a thing, it's okay, we can go through it safely. We have to create a door though, and that door for us looks like self-care. So when we're in those moments and recognising that okay, I've got a lot of behaviour here that's not right, I'm not sleeping well, I don't want to see any friends, I'm drinking way more than is probably recommended by the government, but it's becoming a habit and I'm drinking alone, things like that. It might look like these things combined. When you recognise it and accept it and go, right, this isn't good, this isn't healthy, my self-care elements are, and these will probably fit for everyone actually, so I'm going to read them out, is like, have I eaten? Have I drunk water recently? Have I been outside and got some exercise and fresh air? Have I had my medication? And that could look like, for other people as well, medication, or it could be nicotine, caffeine, those kind of things. And the other vitamin C as well. Have I connected? And talk to somebody about it, and not just anyone, by the way, because I realise some people aren't great to talk to, and God love them, they try and they want to help, I think, but there's a range of people that you can talk to which sometimes doesn't help. There's that one, the person who's always had it worse than you, or the person who tries to aggressively fix the problem rather than just listen to you and let you offload. So make sure it's somebody you can talk to who necessarily is just the right person, the one that deserves to listen to you, the one that isn't necessarily going to belittle your issues. Oh, you think that's bad? We want to try working for the company. Good job I didn't say anything then. So those are the things that help me recognise and go through that wall of awful. And talking to the right person, is that the right thing?
It really is, and I like that analogy as well, the wall of awful, but it fits in kind of with my mirror analogy of when it's dirty you can't see yourself, but if you can clear the way you can start to see through.
I like that.
And I think it's important that you remember, you know, when you are speaking to somebody, yes, it is somebody who is empathetic, somebody who understands to an extent. They don't have to have been through the process that you've been through. No two journeys are the same. But it's also remembering it's not a competition. You know, it's not my awful's worse than your awful, and you know, you are allowed to feel rubbish. You know, and to an element, you know, to a degree, things happen in life, and there's a cultural, a social expectation that you will feel awful when something awful has happened. So it's almost giving yourself a break, letting yourself off the hook there, and remembering that this is a normal response to something bad that's happened. It's about how long does that last for. Not that there's a time frame, but it's about how much that's affecting you on a daily basis as you go through. And what is it affecting, and how can we work with that? So, you know, as Joe said earlier, it is giving yourself permission to be the way that you are and to allow yourself to have those feelings, because it is part of processing what's going on. And it's important, if we don't process things, that's often when we find things happening in our REM sleep, you know, and then we get sleep disturbance, and then we end up having, you know, worsening symptoms and fatigue, etc., because of that. So it's about stopping, as we said before, slowing down, recognising, noticing, and starting to treat yourself as though you're treating other people. You know, it's a good old saying, isn't it? But would you really say all of those awful thoughts that you have to somebody else who's going through that process?
Yeah.
You know, put yourself in an empty chair maybe in front of you and think, would I really say that to somebody else? And if not, why am I saying it to myself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's about being your own best friend, isn't it, Claire? You know,
Absolutely.
If you can be your own best friend and give that kindness and consideration, forgiveness to yourself as you would to your own best friend. And why is it we don't do that?
And talking to yourself as a 9-year-old, and would you say those things to that? What would you say if that 9-year-old told you all those things? I don't think I'm good enough. I've got imposter syndrome. I shouldn't be here. I'm just an annoyance. People don't get on with me. Things like that. And what would you say to that 9-year-old? You'd say, of course they do, you know, and you give that 9-year-old a hug. And that's that self-compassion, isn't it? And I found that really difficult to do, because some people recommend writing that down as well. How's that look in a poem? How's that look in just writing it to a letter to yourself? And that feels really false, especially the British stiff upper lip types, you know, and you're reading this American book and it's like, yeah, you know, I found it really therapeutic to write a letter to myself. I'm like, really? Dear to who it may concern, you know, it's starting off like that, and it's like, well, really odd. But actually, no, there's something about that, and it does take practice and rehearsal. And as you said, talking to the right person. Now, that segues nicely, because the right person is, two of them are definitely here talking on this podcast. And Joe, being a part of wellbeing at Staffs, you are most certainly a point of contact to students and staff listening to this, who might be connecting to this, and hopefully that's the people we're trying to reach and educate. What's available, and how can people access things, and what's on offer?
Well, the first point of contact could just be the landing page, the Staffordshire University current students, and about 2/3 of the way down there's a link there that you can go on, and it tells you all about the student wellbeing service. It gives you contact for external services should you not want to stay in-house, and there's self-help information on there, and you can also download a free app called SAM, and that's for anxiety. They've got a together all 24-hour 7 days a week service that you can tap into as well. And we've also got some of the students in levels 7, 6s who are offering their services as student peer mentors. That's fantastic. That was set up earlier on this year. But from the departments I work in, you've got both mental wellbeing advisors and counsellors. And again, very simple to go onto the landing page, and there's an online form you can fill in and make an appointment with either wellbeing or one of the counsellors or student guidance. and they offer a wealth of information and support, whether it be for personal information, whether it be for academic, and practical support and help as well.
So it's like a one-stop shop. You know, if I wanted to contact the team because of my emotional state, or whether it was something to do with my academic work or my course that I didn't feel I was getting anywhere, and in a crisis moment, or whether it's something on placement, does it not matter? You can come to you, and it's somebody to listen to and to help sort out and unpick those issues.
Absolutely. If you go onto the landing page, the current students, and as I say, about 2/3 of the way down, are heading with the student support, and it's got the student wellbeing service, and it's just as simple as filling out a form to make an appointment, and you can choose whether you want to see a counsellor or a wellbeing advisor or a student guidance advisor, and an appointment can be made, and if you want then to see somebody else within that department, it's just an email, or you'll be directed into the right direction. Yeah.
And is it confidential? Can people talk in confidence? And
yeah, people speak in confidence. Information remains within that team, confidential.
Great, thanks, Joe. That's fantastic, and I think there's a lot I didn't realise that you were mentioning there that was available. And I've been on to the site a little bit too, so that's really good information. A lot of people in healthcare, especially in all of our professions, and this is going out to all professions within health and social care, there is a culture that we've not really talked about, that of why people don't access things like this. Because don't forget your own trust as well, practice placements or when you are employed, and for staff ourselves at Staffordshire Uni, there is access to wellbeing and counselling services. So there's a lot of structure there, but there's historically poor uptake. And I think, and Claire, I'll bring you in to talk. You're probably more qualified to talk about this than me. But anecdotally, speaking to people, there's this culture that two things. One is stigma. I'm no stranger to stigma and the effects it has on self as well, and shame and those things. But there's also a stigma of if you've needed counselling, if you've had to go for counselling, you're somehow weak. You're somehow affected and not able to do your job, those type of things that stop people accessing it. And the other thing is the culture that we are strong, tough, resilient people, and we just get on with it. And that's the culture. We just we know if we've been affected by something, we just move on and get on with it. What do you think, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. When I've done some research recently, it was amongst paramedics, but it can apply across all healthcare in my view. There's lots of barriers. Sometimes we can be our own barrier to accessing help, and that really is the first step, is admitting or noticing that we need help. And that can be connected with views from other people. You can see it yourself as maybe a sign of weakness, as you say, but often mistaken for a sign of strength, and actually taking that more difficult step forward does take determination and strength. So it ties in slightly with the views of others. In professions within healthcare and social care, you do get certain attitudes and behaviours, I think, that are historical and hopefully moving out of the profession. But I think when you're in a position where you expect almost to see traumatic things, to experience high levels of stress, I think there's an expectation that if you've been in that job for a long period of time, you know, you should be used to it. You should be able to deal with it. And it's all of these shoulds, musts, oughts, you know, and the maladaptive assumptions, as we call them, that we develop in ourselves to make us believe that actually we should be able to cope with things, and these become internal, and we try and match that. Whereas in actual fact, you know, these expected norms, if you think of it logically, if we've been in that position for a long period of time, it's going to have taken a toll. And you know, it does. It's a normal human response to have an effect on your mental health, your well-being, when you are exposed to such things for such a period of time. So, it's about breaking down those barriers, not just those in society and views around us in our own culture, within our own roles, but ourselves as well, taking that pressure off and actually reaching out for help and trying to make things better. And there's plenty of opportunities, like Joe said, that are offered and that can make a difference. And I think a balance, a conjunction of that between maybe counselling, psychotherapy, and some self-care and some of your, practical advice as well. I think a balance of that will help you get there.
Absolutely, and that's I implore people to be courageous if you can, and do talk to people if you are struggling, because it's actually quite empowering. And that's what I found, is I was absolutely petrified about talking openly about my own diagnoses, because of the stigma that's still around. Actually, it's better because Rory Bremner's been diagnosed. Once you do break that barrier, and it is very uncomfortable and it feels very wrong to do that, and you do let go of it, it's a journey to recovery, definitely. And there's this thing that the University of Lincoln are looking into, resilience, and actually trying to categorise what resilience is. And they talk about psychological flexibility, and this is what they're studying at the moment. And it's this ability. What they found is people who are naturally resilient tend to accept their current position, even if it's been an abrupt change, be okay with voicing their emotions, and their, being honest about and open about things, and being okay to seek help, because I know there's a lot of resilience to going to counselling and things like that. And the good news is that this isn't a natural trait. Yes, there's a few things that coincide with this, to naturally resilient people, but it can be a learnt procedure. And this is what the study, 3,000 plus sample size, showed, that this can be a learned procedure. And it's ironically, it's a lot about what we've talked about. There's three main elements they talk about, and it's that ability to reflect, accept, and project our what we want our future to look like, and it being meaningful and things like that. The ability to recognise those self-care elements, and I think we've displayed them nicely here. That you are allowed to take time, and if you need help to take time and to look at strategies that suit you, I definitely recommend the CBT element, or counselling if you feel that's a route. And talking to Joe and wellbeing is definitely a route to take you down that line. And these things do help you become more resilient. I'm a testament to that. And even if you think, no, I'm not in the right space to do it, you can get access to this, to all these things, and start that journey, and it'll make a big difference to you being able to be good at your job as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well that they've launched the Start to Success campaign this year as well. And that's a partnership between Staffordshire University, Keele University, the NHS, police and local authorities, raising awareness about mental health, and bringing sort of mental health campaigns to the forefront. And they've done a video as well about reducing stigma, and the Start to Success with Mental Health campaign. So if anybody is concerned or worried, it might be worth going on again to the Staffordshire University site and looking at the Start to Success campaign and watching the video about reducing the stigma.
Wonderful. Right, last thing, I want to end on a high, because I've done podcasting in the past. I was telling my colleague here, sat with me, and it was mostly comedy. So this is a very different vibe to get back into podcasting for me. But I want to end it on something light. So I was reflecting in my place that I like to reflect where all the magazines are and spend time and lock the door. I won't say where it is. But I was thinking, what two things? There's been a lot of changes during lockdown and things like that, and there's a few things that I'd like to see return to normal. But equally, for me, there was a lot of things that I kind of enjoyed about the lockdown. So if you can, think about two things that you would like to return and two things you would keep in the before times. So let's go with Joe.
Oh, for me, I think the things that I'd like to see return is to re-engage with other people, the physical proximity. That for me has been really difficult and quite challenging. So yeah, I'd like that to return to some form of normality.
That's a good one.
The thing that I wouldn't like to change, I think environmentally, I've really enjoyed the reduction in travel. The air feels cleaner. I must admit I've enjoyed working from home because just to be able to look out of the window and keep myself in the here and now and appreciate what we have got. And I think if I'd like anything to stay, it's for people to remember and appreciate what we have got and not what we haven't.
Claire?
I think to an extent I echo one of the things that Joe said there about having that face-to-face back with people, not necessarily over the internet, although I do believe that's given us all a way forward and some people some connectivity that wasn't there before even as well. But I think that connection certainly with family, the face-to-face, the physical with family, and those going through a difficult time. So it's very hard from my experience through this lockdown. You know, there's been myself and members of the family who've had to go through awful experiences alone and not have someone there to hold the hand. So I think I'd like that to return, absolutely. In terms of the positive, I love the connectivity with nature, the walks. You know, all of a sudden it seems like because the government said you can do exercise once a day, I've almost taken that up, whereas it wasn't there before. So yeah, getting out in nature, going on the walks, and I think the creativity as well is the second thing for me. The way I work, the way I operate, the way I thought that I did something has changed, and I've realised there's many different ways to do something now, and I'd like that to change for good, that I can be more creative with how I operate.
That's wonderful. Yeah, for me it was things I'd like to stay would be the reduction in traffic and the more appreciation for getting out and exercising. So all those people that got your push bikes out, walk into the shops, you know who you are. It's in the garage again, isn't it? Full of dust. Stay on the bike. Go to town on the bike. Don't sit in the traffic queue. Come on, let's get the bike out. I know it's cold and things like that. Wear a helmet, please, because that's also good. So yeah, I'd like that ethos of us actually, because for a short snapshot there, we actually did start to look after our health, didn't we? And go, maybe I should go for a run. Maybe I should do some exercise. Keep that spirit. That's what I'll keep. The spirit that we still need to get out and exercise because it's not just about the physical health, it's the mental too. What would I like to have go and stay in the before times? Supermarkets. Don't go back to the way it was. I like the idea that we go round, follow the arrows. For me, especially with my hypersensitive hearing, things like that, the limited amount of people in the shop, wonderful. And hardly anyone will agree with me on that. That's just a personal thing, but that's definitely something I'll keep the shops really quiet, really linear. So I have to walk around here, because what happens with me is I don't just go down the fruit and veg aisle in Aldi. I'll go middle aisle, then to the left, then to the right, then back here again, and then where's the ketchup? But this makes me walk down every single aisle and I don't miss things. It's fantastic. And also Zoom and things like that. Let's keep that. Do you know why? Because I've yet to turn your mic is muted into a drinking game. I still want to do that. With my work colleagues, I've said I couldn't do that on work time. But maybe outside of work time, we'll play the drinking game. You have to take a shot. And if it's alcohol's not your thing, definitely some... orange juice or whatever your favourite drink is. If your mic is muted and you talk and we can see you talking, you have to take a shot. What do you think?
I like it.
Right, well, I think we'll wrap it up. Any top tips, things you want to leave, remembering who's listening, any things you want to, pearls of wisdom that you want to leave people listening with?
I think for me is just be kind to yourself. I know that this is bandied about, but really notice how you're operating. Start to be gentle, take the pressure off, understand it's not just you, and there's an awful lot of people who are there to help and will want to help as well. So things will get better, this is a journey, it's not a destination.
Absolutely, I love that. And Joe?
Oh, absolutely. It is a journey, not a destination. I just like, I suppose, to normalise what's going on.
Yeah.
Not just in the outside world, but normalise what's happening for ourselves and set some boundaries. You know, put some boundaries in place between work and home and your social life, and give yourself a structure and a routine. And whilst doing that, I'll echo what Claire had said, be kind to yourself.
Yeah, I really like that. And for me, my pearl of wisdom is, it is recognised that laughter, humour, comedy, all those things is a recognised therapy. It's good for you. So if you are a victim of a prank that I'm going to do on you, whether you're a student or a member of staff, before you get angry, I'm trying to help you, okay? Just remember that. Right. I've been Ben Woodrow-Hurst, and we've had our guests Joe Johnson and Claire Griffin. Thank you very much for your time, and we really appreciate those the wisdom and the sharing of your journeys and your experience that you've given us, and hopefully that's resounded. And if it has resounded for you, those that are listening, we have got re-listen back for the links that Joe was talking about. We will put links in descriptions, and we will talk about platforms available as well within the staff site where you can listen to this on your device.
The Link at Staffordshire University. Proud to be staffs, proud to be us.